Welcome. How we work, play, and live is being changed by the convergence of technologies. We see the impact everywhere. Leveraging the successes of smart manufacturing, some industries are harnessing the potential of these innovative technologies to improve efficiency and safety. Individuals experience technology convergence every day. This digital disruption comes with its challenges, such as interoperability, security, and privacy, and the benefits may not be evenly distributed. Plus, in some ways, AI is raising the stakes. In this session, we'll explore this topic from two perspectives. We'll consider what it means to standards development, and then also look at how the technology convergence is being realized in the real world. We have a great panel of experts, and I'd like to start by introducing them. Ding Lu is the Deputy Director of the Standards and Test Center of Instrumentation Technology and Economy Institute of China. She received her doctorate degree from Beijing Institute of Technology and has been involved in research, standardization, and technical work in measurement and control systems, systems integration, predictive maintenance, and other areas. Ding Lu is the convener of IEC's Smart Manufacturing Work Group, which facilitates the collection, storage, and distribution of smart manufacturing use cases. Antonio Kung is the CEO and co-founder of Trialogue in France. Antonio has a master's degree from Harvard and an engineering degree from École Centrale in Paris, with more than 30 years of experience in cyber physical systems and the Internet of Things. Antonio brings expertise and know-how, particularly in architecture, interoperability, data security, and protection. He has coordinated numerous national and European collective projects in these fields. He's active in standardization on IoT, security, and data protection, and has been the primary editor of at least 6 ISO IEC standards. Michael Mulkin is the CEO of IS Communications in the UK. Michael has spent almost 30 years partnering with cities, rural areas, and industry on how technology can help neighborhoods and cities work better. For the last 10 years, he's focused on the development and implementation of smart and sustainable city standards and has had the opportunity to work with and learn from many different standards organizations. Michael's chair of the IEC Smart Cities Systems Committee, and he's co-chair of the ISO IEC ITU Joint Smart Cities Task Group. He also works with Open and Agile Smart Cities and the International Smart City Network to support the development and implementation of minimal interoperability mechanisms. And Molly Lesher is the head of Digital Policy, Economics, and Measurement Unit at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD in Paris. She leads the online Going Digital Toolkit, the OECD flagship publication, the OECD Digital Economy Outlook, and the OECD Working Party on Measurement Analysis of Digital Economy. She coordinated the Going Digital project, leading the development of the Going Digital Integrated Policy Framework and the Going Digital Toolkit. She held previous positions in economics and research at the OECD, US Federal Reserve Bank, and Fidelity Investments. And I'm Phil Wemblum. I'm Global Director of Policy, Standards Policy for Intel. And since 2017, I've been chair of ISO IEC JTC1, the Joint Technical Committee of ISO and IEC, which develops international standards in information technology. So let's dive in. First on our, we'll organize this in 2 roundtables, and first with starting on building standards for technology convergence. Let me start by posing a question to you, Antonio. Many standards are being referred to as vertical or horizontal. What are vertical standards and horizontal standards? And can you tell us what's the significance of each one of these in technology integration and convergence?
So, hello everyone. We have 2 types of standards. To simplify, horizontal standards relate to technology, know-how that are common to everyone, while vertical standards do the same, but they reflect a vertical application, such as health, transport, um, smart grids, and the like. Okay, so we are currently witnessing the production of so many technologies, AI, digital twins, metaverse, and also trying to capture lots of transversal concerns such as security, privacy, safety, ethics. And actually, the significance is that we need to integrate that. Okay, so the technology integration, what is at stake, what is the challenge that we are coping with now and in the future, is to properly integrate that. Okay, and the standards should be and will be structured in such a way that you can facilitate this integration.
Thanks, Antonio. Let me turn to you, Michael, and ask a little bit about data management. This is critical in many contexts, and it can be a special challenge for smart cities. And I wondered if you could discuss the challenges and benefits of combining data from multiple sources, for example, from IoT devices and user generated data to improve city services.
Well, of course, one of the challenges and one of the opportunities of cities is that cities are made up of lots of different systems, and each system, whether it's transport, energy, water, waste, health, education, each of those different systems are gathering data that relates particularly to their area of interest. But of course, in cities, everything links up with everything else. We we live as people who interact with all of these different systems, and all of these different systems impact on the other different systems. So one of the challenges is how we can gather data from these different systems where there are different requirements in terms of, for instance, security. Obviously, health information is much more, you need to handle it much more carefully than information about maybe transport and so on. So every different area of city life has its own constraints, its own challenges. But what we need to do is to try and find a way that we can bring together all of these different insights to enable the city to be managed much better as a whole, and also to allow it to be focused much more around each of us as individual citizens. So these are the challenges that we have to make, and that's why this kind of link between the horizontal and the vertical that we've been thinking about just now.
Michael, and maybe as a follow-up, what are governance frameworks, and how can that help with how can that help with implementing data practices and helping smart cities make best use of data?
Sure. So uh, what you need to have is not only the technical standards, but you need to have clear legal agreements and governance processes to make sure that people can rely on, as we start to share data together, that people can rely on that data, that it's, first of all, it's what it says it is on the tin, that it's reliable, it's accurate, it's up to date, it's exactly what it purports to be, but also so that we can understand best how to link all of the different things together. So it's not it's not an easy process at all to do that. And what has to happen is, first of all, everybody has to agree to comply with all sorts of standards in terms of SLAs, in terms of the way they handle personal data, in terms of the way they maintain the data to the proper degree of quality and consistency. And then on the other side, to have proper agreements about how data that's being shared among a common ecosystem will be used to make sure that it's used appropriately, that only certain roles can have access to that data, and that they will use it for only certain purposes to make sure that the data can be managed properly right through the whole ecosystem.
And Michael, where do these governance frameworks come from? Are they developed in standards committees, or where are they coming from?
Well, it's one of those things that, obviously, first of all, there's a kind of the pragmatic approach. What's happening is, increasingly, as cities and communities, but also other ecosystems like ports, port authorities, transport, mobility providers, as they're trying to work out how best to take full value from the data that they've got, to make sure that everyone can have the insights that they need to do that, to play their part in the whole system. So so people are pragmatically trying to put things together. In addition to this, there are obviously organizations like the International Data Space Association, Gaia X, various other initiatives like this that are trying to capture good practice and put things in a clear and unambiguous way, so that they can have guidance documents and things that can be used by whoever's trying to put together these data sharing agreements. And then, of course, those things, they need to be brought into the standards world to make sure that they've got the proper formality and the solid foundation that's needed to make sure people can have confidence that they cover all of the key things that there are. So there's this whole process. And as with all things, what standards are not at the forefront, standards have to be there to see what's being learned, to be able to capture that good practice and then work out where you can actually say this is normative, this everybody agrees on, and then can make that something that's formal and everybody can start to use it together.
Thank you, Michael. That's great. I wonder if we could. I know many people are concerned about whether the benefits of technology convergence are being distributed or made available equitably. And so I wondered if we could turn to you, Molly, and ask if you could tell us what is the digital divide and what should standards developers do to have a positive impact? How should we think about that?
Thanks a lot, Phil. Through our work, we see digital divides along a wide range of dimensions. For example, smaller firms have slower adoption rates of digital technologies than bigger firms. Older people have adopted digital technologies less than younger ones. People with higher education rates use digital technologies more effectively than those with lower education rates. And gaps also exist by gender and geography. And if I could just focus in on gender and geography quickly, differences in girls and boys' STEM education rates, I think they're pretty well known. We also see that young men are twice as likely to be able to program than young women can. And what really struck me is we've recently put together an indicator on our Going Digital Toolkit that confirms that these gender gaps exist later in life. And across OECD countries, so across developed countries, we see the percentage of men working as ICT specialists is 3 to 8 times higher than the percentage of women. Now that's enormous. That's some of the biggest gender gaps I've seen. And what was so shocking about it is that often, we cover quite a few countries. We cover developed and developing, and some are higher, some are lower. In this case, it was in every single country. We saw that trend. And if you don't have women as ICT specialists, if they're not at the table shaping these technologies, especially when you start to think about things like AI, you really have a big risk of bias that will be baked into the technology development itself. And this, for us, is something that's extremely worrying. On geographical digital divides, now we see them both within and across countries. Obviously, bigger countries with big land mass, large, sparsely populated areas have lower quality connectivity. Divides also exist across countries. So for the developed world, we see that almost everybody has a 2G and a 3G connection. But even in OECD countries, not all of them have 100% of the population covered by 4G. And we know that share goes down when you look at emerging economies. And given that high speed and affordable connectivity is really a keystone of technology convergence and a firm's ability to adapt and diffuse the technology, that's going to have a really worrying impact, we think, on innovation, productivity, and growth. In terms of what standards developers can do to help solve some of this, really from our perspective, inclusive standards development is really important to bridge some of these digital divides, built on collaboration and cooperation among all the stakeholders that are relevant. That's trying to get the input of SMEs, it's trying to get the input of women, it's trying to get the input of emerging economies. So almost applying this multi-stakeholder model of internet governance to standards development is something that we think can really lead to better and more inclusive outcomes. Now, we're currently doing a little bit of work on immersive technologies, which is really at the center of technology convergence. And we see here again that standards development is extremely important to foster the interoperability among devices, among platforms, among services across different industries, regions. If not, you see individual companies needing to sort of incorporate accessibility features ad hoc. This is expensive, it's time consuming. And we feel that if we did have some more standards development in this area, it would help not only foster innovation, but help the introduction of some of these features from the outset, which we think would lead to more user-friendly and inclusive outcomes.
Thanks, Molly. So I heard. I mean, this is a widespread and definite challenge, and I heard you'd like standards developers to be more inclusive. Do you have any specific advice or suggestions? There's a lot of standards developers here. What would you like us to do?
So I'm coming from the policy side, and I can only speak to what we do, but when we develop policy frameworks and we also develop policy standards, we have everybody with an equal seat at the table. So we have our members at the OECD coming, but the business community, the technical community, the trade unions, they're all civil society, everybody's there with a strong voice, and that makes developing our policy standards harder. It takes longer. But at the end of the day, you do end up with a better outcome that everybody buys into. And so for us, we take the long road with the hope that in the end, we get the better outcome.
If I can
Thanks,
just step in,
yes,
I
please.
think there are a few things as an organization that we do well, we must do better. But of course, we go for open source. We have programs for SMEs to give them easier access to the same standards. And we have things such as accessibility, where we make sure that when it comes to human interfaces, we're not just dealing with one type of people. Okay, so ISO is trying its best to do that direction, but of course we need to also to improve. I just want to highlight those points.
Thanks, Antonio. I know this touches all of us. Would anyone else like to comment? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Well, it's clearly a big challenge to bring people who are not part of the normal standards development process in. And clearly, as has been said, it makes the standards much better, but it takes a lot longer and a lot more resources. So interestingly enough, I'm at the moment here in Tanzania at the ITUT Study Group 20 meetings, and it's interesting that they use captions, for instance, where there's particular standards that they're working on, where there's remote participation on looking at issues of accessibility. And so they really make sure that where that's possible, they've got the ability for people who may have various challenges to be able to participate as well as possible, and they're given particular opportunities in those kind of meetings. And I think it's those sorts of ways how we can make sure that we think about every different community that needs to have a voice in what the sort of standards we're doing. And that's clearly our role as international standards bodies. I mean, our role is not just to serve industry, but it's about to serve society and to make sure that the standards that industry complies with are safe and inclusive and helpful. And so it's really important that we as international standards organizations really proactively find ways to identify exactly who we need to be listening to and to make sure that they have the chance to share their thoughts and ideas with us.
Thanks, Michael. And maybe a follow-up for you, Molly. Before the pandemic, I think most standards committees held in-person meetings. And the pandemic forced us to do everything virtually. And now after we're through the pandemic, at least in my committee, we've retained the virtual option in many different committees and working groups where participants can attend in person, but they can also attend remotely. And we've seen some, I think, more inclusive participation as a result of that. Do you have any data on that, or how do you think that's helpful? Any comments?
I don't have any data on that. I can only speak from my own perspective. And while having, my committee, we do hybrid option as well. And while that can bring in new voices, which is hopeful, we have more people attending our meetings than ever before. I've also felt to advance on some of the tougher issues. It kind of required people to be there, to have the sidebars, to have the lunches and the coffees. And, for us, it's been a mixed bag, I guess.
Yeah, fully agree that attending remotely isn't the same. So I wonder if we could switch over now to looking at an industry perspective. Many factories are transitioning to make appropriate use of digital technologies to become smart factories. And Ding, I wonder if we could ask you to share what are the most important policies and standards needed to enable that transition.
Thank you. We talk a lot about the technologies, and now I'd like to share some policies status in China. And I know from a worldwide aspect, lots of countries pay a lot of attention on the policies to promote related technology development. So China as well, they highly concerned about especially the digital transformation of the manufacturing industry, which has risen to a national strategy during we call it 14th five-year plan period. So in this 14th five-year plan strategy, it mentions digital transformation as a whole to drive the transformation of production, lifestyles, and governments. And in recent years, related ministries and commissions have successfully issued around 20 policies related to digital transformation. This fully reflect the importance at the policy level and the country's urgent requirement of such digital transformation or technology convergence. Related policies focus on three aspects. First, they want to accelerate the introduction of a top-level policies document, such as digital transformation of small and medium-sized SME enterprises, because the SME are a very important part of manufacturing development. Secondly, is to want to guide the local government to support the digital transformation of manufacturing industries, to promote integrated development, and to provide guidance for manufacturing enterprises to carry out digital transformation practice. Third is to improve the standard system, because we all know standards very important, and also it's very important for the industry development. So these policies, one important topic of these policies is to improve the standard system about such as industrial equipment and the data dictionary and the digital supply chain and other topics. To lead the manufacturing enterprises to accelerate their business transformation, the model innovation, and organizational change supported by these standards. And I think this policies has played a very important guidance role in industry development. Related policies can not only strengthen the construction of industrial basic system, promote the management innovation and also the technology innovation, and to support the progress of industry digital transformation. But more importantly, it also encourages the enterprise, especially the SMEs, to enhance their competitiveness, so that these enterprises can see the new development opportunities and achieve the sustainable coordinated development to meet the development requirement of industrial digitalization trend.
Thanks, Ding. It sounds like companies interested in digital transformation and smart manufacturing need to consider both standards and policies as tool to help them achieve that. Do you think we have the right connections between the standards committees and the policymakers? Do we need to do anything differently there?
Yeah, I think so. Not only in China, but also worldwide. Lots of government officials or the department, they would like to listen to the voice from the standardization, from the industrial side, and the expert could participate in the related strategy plans, the decision process. So I think now more and more interaction happens in this proceed, and I think for the officials, for the policies, they all think the importance of the standards and also standardization experts. They are very important part of the whole industry development.
Great, thank you, Ding. I'd like to pause here and see if we have any questions from our audience that we can take. Any questions so far? I don't see any. I think maybe our, oh, okay. We do have a few here. Let's start with the one, and I'll open this to anyone on the panel who'd like to respond. What's the impact of tech convergence on employment? Does anyone have data or insights on that? No takers. The data I've seen, interestingly, showed that countries and regions that were farthest along on technology convergence had done very well on employment. So it may not be what you would expect. The second question here is the current standards development model able to keep pace with the emerging and converging tech? Do we have a choice between quality and quantity? Is there a trade-off? Would anyone like to take that?
So this is a precise reason where we have this, let's say, classification between horizontal and vertical standards. Okay, if you leave the world with only vertical standards, you will have huge number of standards, and you have siloed. Okay, and this is not what we want. This is what we had in the past because we're specialized. But now with all those horizontal and transversal technologies and aspects. Remember, AI, metaverse, those are horizontal technologies. Security, privacy, ethics, those are horizontal concerns, trustworthiness, okay? All of those things, we are discussing them, how to integrate them, okay? If we integrate them properly, first of all, we have less to invent, we have more to reuse, and to reuse effectively, more to share, okay? So this is the objective, and it's not so choice between quality and quantity is actually we have to optimize the integration. So at the end we have less standards but more profiles. So we are also working in standardization in the notion of smart standards, which are actually allowing you to generate the version, the profile, which is important to your domain. Or for instance, in a smart city, transport or domain vehicle transportation or things like that, you could come up with the same core standards and specialize them to what is needed on your side. Okay, and this is really, to me, the challenge which standardization is trying to solve right now. And obviously, Phil, I'm sure will agree, we need to keep the pace ourselves at standardization level so that we can serve the industry needs.
And if I could just add a few things to that, I think one thing that we're trying to do in open and agile smart cities is to think about minimal interoperability mechanisms, not minimum, but to try and look at how we can come up with interoperability mechanisms that are good enough to get things going. And it links in my mind with the thought of minimal viable standards. We think we hear about this in industry, and it's about the fact that in the standards world, we can't wait for industry to sort things out and then say, okay, now let's standardize it. We have to be much more engaged and involved with the developments of new technologies, and put out some provisional suggestions for what seems to be what is needed to help build consistency, see if that's taken up, get feedback about how well that works, what's missing, and spend some time working with users in seeing our standards, our minimal viable standards implemented, getting the feedback that then gives the confidence to come into the more formal standardization mechanism. So I think that's one really, really important aspect of it. I think the other thing is to do gap analysis work. Fingers crossed, we're hoping to do some gap analysis standards on city digital twins. And that's the kind of thing that's really important. Here you've got cities around the world that are experimenting with digital twin technology. How can we engage with them to find out what they're finding useful in terms of standards, what gaps they see as important that need to be filled, so that we can use the information about what's actually going on in the world to feed directly into the standards work that we need to be doing. Thanks.
Just want to add one thing. The installation, what we try to do is to come up with presentations and models which are easy to grasp by everyone. The minimum interoperability mechanism is about that. Digital twin is exactly the same thing. A digital twin is a very simple representation, yet so powerful, so that you can implement the things at the at every level. Okay, and this is quite important. So we have better quality systems because we have better standards on better solutions.
Phil, could I go back to the labor market question? Is that annoying?
No, that's great, Molly. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to come in here because when we started the Going Digital project back in 2017, there was all this worry about robots taking your jobs, right? And the ICT sector was really bad and we were all going to be out of a job and all that. And when we did some of the research, we started looking at labor market implications by sector, by digital intensive sectors. So this is basically the idea that digital transformation, digital technologies are everywhere now, and sectors are all digital to a greater or lesser extent. And one of the really interesting things we found that in the past decade, and that was going back a little bit now, 8 out of 10 jobs were created in highly digitally intensive sectors. And so I think that's a real positive thing for the tech sector, and a more nuanced way maybe to think about how, tech is impacting labor markets. Sorry, I just wanted to come back and mention that.
That's very helpful, Molly. So somebody might think that as tech comes in, it's going to automate everything and robots are going to put you out of work, but it's actually the opposite outcome is what you're saying.
That's exactly it. And it's this idea of digital intensity. And we're trying to get people to move away from thinking about tech as ICT only. It's obviously the core, but it's everything now. And so we need a more nuanced way of kind of analyzing and thinking about it.
Good. Well, we had some other questions, but I think I'd like to move to the second part of our discussion today, and then we'll come back to questions toward the end. And I think, Molly, your intervention is really a good transition to that, where I'd like to focus on how we apply standards for technology convergence. And I wondered if we can start back with you, Ding, and ask what are the common barriers factories face when they're going digital, and how do policy interventions address those challenges? In other words, if a factory of any size wants to go digital, what should it be looking for in the policy space?
Okay. Just now I mentioned there are lots of policies to promote the digital transformation. That's the reason because during the whole process of digital transformation, there will be some difficulties, some challenges for the enterprise. especially for some traditional enterprise. Digital transformation is not only a change in their own situation, in their factories or in the workshop, and also the production mode, not like the one before, but it's also a transformation of a way of thinking, even a change in the previous cognition, which is we can show the in three aspects here. First, digital transformation is based on customer demand as we can call it dominate from the external demand force the internal change. So you have to change based on this digital transformation. And the value strategy orientation of enterprise development need to change from the past capacity driven to now the data driven thinking. Second, enterprise decision makers should become the leader of this digital transformation. And the decision making concept should change from the empirical judgment from what you experience there to the nowadays it should be data speaking and more intelligent decision making. So the decision mechanism will be changed. And third, it's necessary to break the traditional boundary and the gaps between the business and the information technology to establish a new style of digital organization to realize the integration and the innovation through the digital transformation and restructure the whole business portfolio, collaborative mode, and the management level of the enterprise. So these are only some of the aspects, some of the challenge for the enterprise, for the factories they may meet in the digital transformation, especially some this decision making or some production management mode. So this thing maybe it's very difficult for the enterprise. And for this aspect, some policies they could be a very good guidance for the companies, and they can provide some help, some directions for the companies which way to go, and also there will be some project to support the enterprise to move forward to the digitalization.
Thank you, Ding. That sounds like very good guidance. I wanted to return to our the topic of the digital divide, and if we look into the future, artificial intelligence is expected to play a big role in many sectors via technology convergence. So thinking about the digital divide, Molly, I wondered if you have comments on what we need to consider so that the benefits of AI are equitably distributed, or maybe how does AI change our thinking about the digital divide and what we need to do?
So I think it's important to kind of think about how AI is diffusing now. You see that certainly large firms are taking up AI more than small firms. You see that it's largely concentrated in the ICT sector itself. So I think it's important to think about the sectoral differences and the need to probably try to get AI to diffuse better into other sectors. What I would say about making it more equitable and maybe more ethical is that we need kind of principles, standards, guidance to make that happen. And probably some of you are aware of the OECD AI principles. There's a ton of them. They were one of the first intergovernmental principles on AI that came out. And one of them is on trustworthy AI that respects human rights and democratic values and this issue of fairness. And so I think that when sort of designing AI systems, it's really important to keep these high-level principles in mind. Obviously, practically, that's not always easy, but I think it's important in ensuring that you have, again, the right people around the table when these systems are being developed, can help make sure that, all voices are heard. Also, sort of thinking about boosting diffusion of AI and thinking about data, if I go back to a little bit the conversation we had before, I think that that's becoming more and more of a huge issue, especially in technology convergence. And in some of our work on virtual reality, and we're working with Jeremy Balanson from Stanford on this, for us, it's really worrying thinking about these reams of biometric data that some of these immersive experiences have to generate, right? You can't have a VR experience unless you have cameras, unless everybody's tracking you all the time. So you need the data to have the experience, but then what do you do with that data, and how do you make sure that all people are protected? And something that I learned recently in doing that work that I wanted to share quickly is that your unconscious movements, the way you flicker your eyelids, your facial expressions are much more predictive of identifying an individual than an iris scan. And that's insane. And so you think, for me anyway, this is going to be kind of a huge new issue that we all need to confront as we try to make, and AI is part of this sort of immersive tech ecosystem, how we make it ethical, how we make it safe, how we make sure that we protect in some sense some of our most vulnerable, i.e. children and others.
Thank you, Molly. That's a lot to think about. I wondered if, and if others want to comment on any of these, jump in, but I'm going to come back to you, Antonio. You talked earlier about vertical and horizontal standards, and I wondered if you could share any examples of how they're being implemented in the real world. Are they a factor in AI, the way AI is being applied?
Yeah, so AI is so important, and I want to highlight the OECD report, which highlights those principles. Okay, you can say they are high-level requirements, and I can confirm that we try to take them on board in standards. So all the standards on AI, they will start with those principles, and then you will refine them into operational requirements on what it is you implement. Okay, so I would call them horizontal standards. We have quite a few in SE42 elsewhere, but SE42 is the committee on AI. So they are still working on those standards. Now, how do you connect to verticals? So I want to give two examples. One is health, okay? The health domain, you have another committee, which is TC15, working on health informatics. They have been working on AI from the start. So there is a joint working group where they work together to make sure that you do not reinvent the wheel or you do not create a silo, okay? And it's going to be the same for, say, in automotive. You have another standard on safety and AI, because in automotive, when it comes to, let's say, autonomous vehicles, safety is at stake. So it's yet another level of precautions we have to take. And it is only normal that the automotive industry is taking that into account, but yet it has to make sure that it follows the same principles which Molly has mentioned and the OECD document has mentioned and other documents are mentioned, including, I can refer also to this legal move in Europe called AI Act. Basically, they're trying to think about those high-level requirements, principles, and see how we use them, okay? And actually, the ethical part of it, the example of Molly about the let's say, coming up, understanding what the people, finding out who our people are and things like that. You have a huge ethical things to take into account. And then this has to be smoothly, yet surely integrated in our practice.
So thanks, Antonio. It sounds like having different communities of expertise work together is really important for realizing the benefits of both vertical and horizontal standards in the market in the examples you cited.
Yeah, not only that, but it's very important that ISO, and I know you are doing it, Phil, because I see a few examples. We must do it at a larger scale. Well, the huge community of people that are working separate things, at some point they get together because we have a common things to win, okay, common approach to get, so that we take into account all the things. So we must not implement a system where we forgot, for instance, one aspect. And so, for instance, ethics, okay, so it has to be there, okay, and we must make sure that we do it in a proper way, so that it's not preventing the technology and the good aspects of technology to happen, but just to make sure that we don't forget it and we do it properly, and sometimes cautiously, okay, because when you have an AI system that's deciding by itself, you need to be cautious.
Yeah. So it sounds like when we bring people with different expertise together, that's where the magic happens, and we get good solutions
Yes.
if we work at it.
Yeah.
Michael, I wonder if we could turn to you. You've talked about standards that are helping make cities smarter, and I'm intrigued by this minimal approach that you described, kind of an incremental way of building solutions. But I wondered if you could give us what's your take on whether international standards are being used effectively to make cities smarter. What's the status of that, or is it having a positive impact, and where are the opportunities to do better?
So, um, with all of these things, you can take a very positive view, or you can try and look at it in a negative way. I mean, the challenge, of course, is that there are a small number of cities around the world that are really passionate about becoming smarter. And they are grabbing hold of anything that they can get that will give them good guidance about how they manage and govern their cities and how they can use technology to really take things forward. I guess the real challenge that we need to face in international standardization is how we don't just address, in terms of cities, address the larger cities, the well-resourced cities, the cities with a strong legacy, the cities with lots of expertise that can take full advantage of the things that are there. But we try and find the sorts of standards and guidance that can be implemented by a small city, a few 100,000, even smaller, maybe 50,000 population, that still needs to be able to use technology, digital technology effectively, and needs to be able to do it within its limited expertise and resources, and to be able to see quick results that can demonstrate to the citizens who vote for the governance of that community, the confidence to continue to encourage them to taking it forward. And I think that's where the real challenge is, and that's one of the reasons we're trying to work on these minimal interoperability mechanisms. And one of the reasons I'm here in working with ITU, it just so happens to be ITU because that's the way the Commission has moved this forward, is that we're trying to develop minimal interoperability mechanisms as a kind of an approach to standardization, a kind of intermediate approach, where what we're looking at is to say clearly, fully blown standards which cover every eventuality and which are very solid and reliable, and you can have great confidence in the detail of them. That's the aim. But to get cities started, we need to have the kind of the 80-20 rule. What are the 20%? What are the 20% of recommendations or requirements and standards that will provide 80% of the value? If we can kind of find some of those things where we can help provide guidance to cities and communities that don't have great resources, that are just beginning the digital transformation journey, to give them the confidence to get started, but not started in a way that's kind of second rate or cheap, just for the sake of it, but get started in a way that this is the first steps. And once they put those in place and can see the results from it, they can then continue to add more of the key requirements of standards so that they can continue to progress and get an even more solid foundation for what they're doing. And that I think is, it'd be a really great thing if we can start to see that it's not like interoperability or not interoperability, a standard or not a standard, but we can try and see in the standard as well some kind of a pathway where we can make sure, particularly where we're looking at SMEs or we're looking at cities and communities which are trying to do a lot with little resources, where we can see, can we provide them with some useful practical first steps that are solid and sound, and they can know once they've taken those steps, they can continue to move forward with the great wonderful standards that ISO and other bodies are developing.
Thanks, Michael. And as I said, I think that sounds like a very practical approach. You had talked earlier about data governance and how cities can use data. And I wondered if you have any examples of cities that are successfully using data, maybe through federated data standards, to benefit their citizens. Any specific examples that you could highlight for us? Where is it working well?
Well, it's there are, you can think of the kind of the Pathfinder, the star cities around. I mean, Helsinki, of course, is doing some very useful work. It's got a long tradition of using data in innovative ways, very much focused on the citizen. I think one of the interesting things that they're working on, and it's something that we're working with them in terms of developing a minimal interoperability mechanism on personal data management. And that's about the fact that often when we talk about personal data management, it's in a kind of a negative sense, how to stop our data being misused. And so, GDPR and other similar legislation around the world and standards are all about how to make sure that we can preserve the privacy of the individual in terms of their data. But on the other side of it is, how can the citizen unlock the data about themselves that's valuable to help two things: to help cities, for instance, have a rounder and better picture of who they are and what their needs are, so that the cities can provide much better and fuller and richer sets of services, and on the other hand, to help the citizen themselves work through the maze of all the different bodies that they have to interact with. And so, one simple example, one of many that Helsinki is doing, is where they offer subsidized childcare places for people on low income. And there's this trial which is proving enormously successful, where because they've got clear technology processes in place to help the citizens be in charge of their data, it makes it easy if I want to apply for a subsidized childcare place because of my income or my disability or something else, that I'm able to allow the childcare provider not to get the information about me, but to get information that says, yes, for these reasons, this person is eligible for that subsidized place. And so it's helping the citizen to feel much more in control of the data about themselves and to be able to use it very positively to make their lives easier.
Thanks, Michael. That's a great example. I'd like to transition now back to questions and reflections from the floor. So let's pause and organize ourselves for that. I see one from maybe from the previous session, but I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about now. How do SMEs manage the financial implications of digital transformation? I mean, this isn't free, right? But it's I think an important question for the digital divide and being inclusive. Do we have any thoughts on that? Anyone on the panel? How SMEs can manage the financial implications of digital transformation?
So maybe I can say something about the SMEs, because the SMEs have to cope with this complexity, okay? And the role of standards is to work on solutions and a way of looking at standards which are minimizing their access, so that actually they focus on what is important and what is needed, okay? And the minimum interoperability mechanism, which Michael mentioned, is just one example, okay? And in the future, what we have to do is, again, being able to define profiles that are well accepted, standardized, and usable by SMEs, okay? So that we create, we talk about smart cities, but about ecosystem where actually the SMEs can work together specialized, being specialized, and work out and creating innovation and things like that. Okay, and this is of course addressing the divide between big companies that are able to invest on everything versus small companies which need to address and provide their own value to the system. So to me, standardization is actually will actually work on those approaches to allow for SMEs to take advantage of the market.
Thanks,
Maybe
Antonio. And if I understand that, you believe profiles are a way that can help standards adapt to the needs of SMEs and
Yes,
enable them
not
to
not
use it.
only that, but it's a practice that is very classical, has been around for 30 years in ISO. So we just
Mhm.
need to apply them. Okay, we need comitology, we need consensus to define the standards. Like in data space, we're doing it, but elsewhere, so that people can then safely say, yes, we can use SMEs can use. We can go ahead because this is going to be the standard everyone will be using.
Thanks, Antonio. Molly, go ahead.
just to say on our side, quite a few of our member countries have programs to support digitalization of SMEs, targeted skills programs. For example, Germany has a really effective cybersecurity skills program for SMEs. And then there's some programs that try to connect SMEs with larger firms in these global value chains. And I think that, at least from our perspective, has been a really great way for SMEs to learn kind of the opportunities of digitalization and how to combat some of the risks.
Terrific. Molly, I wanted to also come back. We had a question on developing countries that rely on labor, and as they go digital, is that something which increases the digital divide? Maybe this is related to the employment question that you touched on earlier. Do you have thoughts on that? So, as if a developing country relies significantly on labor, how does digital transformation impact the digital divide they see?
Can I see a few ideas about this?
Yes. All right. Go ahead.
Things about the developing country, I think I'm quite. I can have some comments about this, and from my opinion, now because of the digital transformation, so I think it's a must way to go, because even for the developing countries, they rely much on labor, but the labor has become more and more expensive. For example, in China. So and also besides that, for example, the supply chain has become digital. You will have lots of requirements from digital perspective, and also the enterprise, they have the cost efficiency, the fast speed to manufacturing, and high quality for the product. So everything forces you to become a digital. But from the labor questions, I think in this way, some low skilled labor may be replaced by the machines, and that push the education system changed. And in China, lots of new courses about digital, about AI, and this new technology has added in the university education system. And for the workers in the factories, they need to have life cycle studies to continuously to improve their capability. So that's my opinion. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ting. That's a great perspective. We're at the end of our session, and I just want to make a few final comments. First, I'd like to thank our panelists, Antonio and Ding and Molly and Michael. Fantastic perspectives here, and I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. We've heard about the importance of policy and standards in achieving digital transformation. We've heard about the role of horizontal and vertical standards in achieving that. We've heard about the digital divide and what standards developers and people deploying technology can do to address that, so that the benefits of technology convergence are equitably distributed, and also about using data wisely, and appreciate the examples from Michael. And I'm intrigued and want to learn more, Michael, from you about minimal interoperability mechanisms and this incremental approach to standards, building something that works and is good enough, and then moving on from there. I think that was an exciting concept for technology convergence. So thank you to our audience. We appreciate your questions as well, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.